the soldiers at the front lines and the leaders began to realize we are up against a sophisticated enemy, and we have got us a full-size, sure enough, war on our hands.
As U.S. troops retreated south, they were joined by tens of thousands of desperate Korean refugees trying to escape the communists. Sometimes hidden among them were North Korean snipers. When fighting broke out, civilians were caught in the deadly crossfire.
Now, you put young people in the field in a highly fluid situation, as it was in Korea. Most of them are not well-trained. You have a very well-trained enemy coming at them. You're going to have lots of panic occur. And I'm sure that there were a great number of innocents that were killed.
By July of 1950, UN forces were trapped in a 90 by 50 mile pocket around the southern port of Busan. They were battling to hang on.
Well, the Busan perimeter was the place where the High Command was able to finally stop, along the Naktong River mostly, which provided a natural defensive line.
The Busan perimeter was it. We had to hold it or it would have been America's Dunkirk.
By the time we got there in early August, the North Koreans had driven the 24th and the 25th almost into the waters. And as we proceeded, when we did land in the north, we were greeted by trucks of dead GIs just stacked up like fireplace wood with tarpaulin over them.
To rescue the troops at Busan, General MacArthur, now head of the UN command, pressed ahead with a risky plan to land troops behind enemy lines at the port of Incheon on Korea's west coast.
The MacArthur tactic was a brilliant military maneuver. Many military officers advised against it, and he went ahead with it.
Our purpose of going into Incheon was to relieve the pressure on the troops encircled at Busan to the south.
What the Incheon operation did was throw the North Koreans into a panic because now their rear areas and their ability to get out had been cut off. They were, in effect, out on a limb.
On 16 September, the 1st Marine Division moves through Incheon. Their objective is Seoul.
It was successful, but as we going into Seoul, that was a very difficult fight there. Again, it was street fighting from house to house, building to building, and we had to go through and use tanks and sometimes blow the buildings apart. And we lost a lot of good Marines there at that time.
I went into Seoul shortly after that. I can remember walking in single file with a company of American soldiers, seeing on all sides of us wreckage and human misery. And the one sight that will remain with me forever and is burned in my mind as if I was looking at it now was of a little Korean child sitting on the curb, weeping bitterly. And one of the soldiers in this file turned to his fellow soldier and said, "What's the kid crying about?" And the other soldier responded, "He's just learned that he's a Korean."
Following the Incheon landing and the recapture of Seoul, General MacArthur ordered American and UN soldiers to move rapidly north across the 38th parallel. The goal was to destroy what remained of the North Korean army and reunify the country. But the Chinese had other plans.
One of the great mistakes that General MacArthur made was his failure to recognize that the Chinese had entered the war. Touring around the area on reconnaissance in my Jeep, every village, every person we met was talking about Chinese, Chinese, Chinese. There were Chinese everywhere.
Soon the bitter North Korean winter began to set in. The temperature could drop to 40 degrees below zero, and the troops were not prepared.
I remember on trips up to the front lines that the Marines had the old Mickey Mouse thermal boot, which was an innovation in those days. The Army was still with the old World War II leather boot, so that at night the Army would sneak across the division lines and try and swipe the boots from the Marines.
On November the 3rd of 1950, when we were on the Yalu River in North Korea, we were under the impression that the war was over, and we were waiting to go home. We had no winter clothing at all, because we didn't think we would need it.
MacArthur said to his army in November, "We've won the war, the communists are finished," and left his army out exposed. And then he made the announcement, "We'll be home for Christmas."
Well, in Thanksgiving of 1950, we were located in the Chongchong Valley on the Chongchong River, about 20 miles north of a little town of Kunuri. And the mess sergeants brought up our Thanksgiving dinner, turkey and the trimmings and the hot food containers.
And there was nothing happening. It was very quiet. It wasn't even a shot fired. And then all of a sudden, a tremendous bugle blowing, horns blowing, and the Chinese crossed the border.
Just before daylight, when the first rosy fingers of dawn were streaking through the eastern horizon, firing began to break out, and we found out that there were Chinese soldiers all around us and among us. They were swarming all over us. And for the next hour until it got daylight, we were engaged in a bitter firefight, hand-to-hand fighting. We had to leave our people behind, who were begging us not to do so. They were wounded in the rice paddies alongside and screaming, "Please don't leave us behind. Don't go off and leave us." But we had no choice.
I'm very happy that I got out. However, a lot of my colleagues did not get out. There was only 10 of us that got out of 250 that was either killed or captured.
And no one even talks about why we allowed all of those men to be surrounded and chopped up like they were. And even today, they don't even talk about it. But it was wrong.
The problems were just beginning. Across the mountains near the frozen Chosin Reservoir, 25,000 men in the U.S. 1st Marine Division were surrounded by Chinese and fighting for their lives.
And about 10:30 at night, flares started flying. Chinese screaming, "Marine, you die, Marine, you die." And they came forward in wave-like tactics. I got hit in the face and chest by fragments of grenades. People saying, "Captain, what do we do?" I said, "You better fight or we're never going to get out of here."
The first wave would have hand grenades, the second wave would have rifles, the third wave would have nothing. As the Chinese troops in front would fall, the ones behind would pick up their rifles and continue in.
There was a Tokon Pass that had to be held. If they had taken the hill, they could have cut off the only road, and our men wouldn't have gotten out. I was able to get behind a rock and shield myself, and I was able to pick some of them off. I got hit in the leg on the right side, trying to get the ammo cans to the machine gun that was on the point. And then I got hit the second time in my lower part on my left leg. It's like Custer with the Indians surrounded him.
And the regimental commander sent to me and told me in somewhat desperate terms that we've got to rescue them. It would have been disastrous for that entire part of the operation if we had failed to open that pass.